The crack of gunfire split the morning air as the first rays of sun painted the Arizona desert gold. Teresa O'Malley clutched the leather seat of the lurching stagecoach, her knuckles white as another bullet splintered the window frame inches from her face. This wasn't how her journey west was supposed to unfold. "Get down!" the driver shouted from above, his voice barely audible over the thundering hooves and the sharp reports of gunfire. Teresa ducked, pressing herself against the floor of the coach. Dust swirled around her, coating her traveling dress and filling her lungs. The year was 1875, and the promise of a new life teaching at a frontier school had drawn her from Boston to the untamed Arizona territory. Now, as bandits attacked the Butterfield Overland Mail stagecoach at dawn, that promise seemed destined to die in the desert. Beside her, an elderly couple huddled together, the woman softly crying while her husband tried to comfort her with trembling hands. Across from Teresa sat a young banker, his face ashen with fear as he clutched his satchel. "They are gaining on us," the shotgun messenger yelled. A moment later, his body slumped from view, and Teresa heard the sickening thud as he hit the ground. The stagecoach lurched violently as the driver fought to maintain control. Through the window, Teresa could see 4 riders closing in, bandanas covering their faces, guns blazing in the golden dawn light. The lead bandit was nearly alongside the coach now, reaching out to grab the reins. Teresa closed her eyes, certain these were her final moments. Then came a new sound, a thunderous battle cry and the pounding of fresh hooves approaching from the ridge. Her eyes snapped open as a lone rider appeared as if conjured from the morning haze, galloping down from the rocky outcropping. The newcomer rode like a man possessed, his duster billowing behind him as he bore down on the bandits. His hat was pulled low, but Teresa caught a glimpse of determination etched on his sun-bronzed face as he passed the window. In one fluid motion, he drew his revolver and fired, hitting the lead bandit squarely. The man toppled from his horse with a cry that was lost in the chaos. The remaining attackers wheeled their horses around, momentarily confused by this unexpected opposition. The mysterious rider used their hesitation to his advantage, positioning himself between the stagecoach and the bandits. "Keep going," he shouted to the driver. "I'll hold them off." The driver needed no encouragement, snapping the reins and urging the team to greater speed. Teresa pressed her face against the window, watching as the stranger faced down 3 armed men alone. His horse, a magnificent black stallion, stood steady as he fired again, wounding another bandit. The outlaws returned fire, bullets kicking up dust around the lone defender. One grazed his shoulder, tearing his duster, but he seemed not to notice. He fired twice more in quick succession, and another bandit fell. The remaining 2 attackers exchanged glances, then abruptly turned their horses and fled, disappearing into the scrubland. As the stagecoach hurtled forward, Teresa watched the mysterious man holster his gun and scan the horizon to ensure the danger had truly passed. Then, he spurred his horse after the coach, quickly closing the distance. The banker across from Teresa let out a relieved sigh. "Is it over? Have we been saved?" Before she could answer, the coach began to slow. Through the window, Teresa could see the driver gesturing to their rescuer, who now rode alongside. The coach came to a stop, dust swirling around them in the growing morning light. "Everyone all right in there?" A deep voice called. The door swung open, and Teresa found herself looking up into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen. The man stood there, one hand on the door, the other resting on his holstered revolver. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but handsome, with a strong jaw partially hidden by a few days' growth of beard. He couldn't have been more than 30. "We're unharmed, thanks to you," Teresa said, finding her voice. "The messenger." "I saw him fall," the man said solemnly. "Nothing to be done for him now, I'm afraid." The driver climbed down from his perch, his face grim. "Vaughn Lucas," he said, extending his hand to their savior. "I won't forget what you did here today." "That's your name?" Teresa asked, surprised. "No, madam," the stranger said with a slight smile. "He's introducing himself to me. I'm Vincent Lawson." "Vincent," Teresa repeated softly. The driver, Vaughn, shook his head. "We're still a good 4 hours from Tucson with these horses winded as they are. And I don't like the idea of traveling without a shotgun rider, even if those bandits don't come back." Vincent nodded, surveying the terrain. "I'll ride with you the rest of the way." "You don't have to do that," Teresa said, though she felt immeasurable relief at his offer. Vincent's eyes met hers again, and something passed between them, a connection she couldn't explain. "I insist, Miss Teresa O'Malley." "Miss O'Malley," he said, tipping his hat. "I'd be honored to ensure you reach Tucson safely." Within minutes, they had respectfully covered the fallen messenger's body with a tarp and secured it to the roof of the coach. Vincent helped the shaken passengers back inside, his hand lingering on Teresa's just a moment longer than necessary. As the journey resumed, Vincent rode alongside the coach, occasionally dropping back to check their trail or scouting ahead when the terrain allowed. Through the window, Teresa watched him, struck by the confidence in his posture and the alert way he scanned their surroundings. The elderly woman beside her noticed her interest. "Quite the hero, isn't he?" she said with a knowing smile, like something from a dime novel. Teresa felt heat rise to her cheeks. "We're all fortunate he came along when he did." "Providence, dear," the woman said, patting Teresa's hand. "Some things are meant to be." The next few hours passed without incident. When they stopped briefly to rest the horses at a small creek, Vincent dismounted and approached Teresa as she stretched her legs beside the coach. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice gentler than before. "Better, thank you," she said, trying to sound composed despite the way her heart quickened at his proximity. "I've never experienced anything like that attack. I've only been in the territory for 2 days." "It's not usually this exciting," Vincent said with a hint of a smile. "What brings you to Arizona, if I may ask?" "I'm to be the new schoolteacher in Tucson," Teresa explained. "The previous teacher returned east to care for her ailing mother." Vincent nodded appreciatively. "Education's sorely needed out here. Most children get little more than what their parents can teach them between chores." "And you, Mr. Lawson, what were you doing out in the desert so early this morning?" A shadow crossed his face. "I've been tracking those men for 3 days. They robbed a bank in Prescott, killed 2 people." He looked away. "One was a friend of mine." "I'm sorry," Teresa said softly. "I wasn't fast enough to save your messenger," he said, his voice tight with regret. Teresa impulsively touched his arm. "But you saved everyone else. That counts for something." Their eyes met again, and that inexplicable connection flared between them. Vincent opened his mouth to speak, but the driver's call interrupted the moment. "Time to move on. Want to reach Tucson before dark." The remainder of the journey passed more quickly than Teresa expected. When the stagecoach finally rolled into Tucson in the late afternoon, she felt a curious mixture of relief and disappointment. Relief at arriving safely, disappointment that her time with Vincent was ending. The town bustled with activity: miners, cowboys, merchants, and settlers going about their business along the dusty main street. The coach stopped before the overland office, and a small crowd gathered upon seeing the body strapped to the roof and hearing the driver's account of the morning's events. As Vincent helped Teresa down from the coach, the local sheriff approached, his star gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Heard there was trouble," he said, eyeing Vincent. "You the one who stepped in," Vincent nodded. "Vincent Lawson. The bandits were part of the Prescott robbery gang. Two got away, heading south." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "The bounty hunter, heard of you, didn't expect you in these parts." Teresa glanced at Vincent with surprise. He hadn't mentioned being a bounty hunter. "I'll need statements from all of you," the sheriff continued. "And we'll need to arrange for the messenger's burial." The next hour passed in a flurry of activity as statements were taken and arrangements made. The sheriff sent telegrams about the bandits, while the stage company representative grimly discussed compensation for the messenger's family. Through it all, Vincent remained near Teresa, a steady presence amid the chaos. When everything was settled, Teresa found herself standing with her trunk outside the hotel where she would stay until more permanent lodgings could be arranged. "Well, Miss O'Malley," Vincent said, suddenly looking uncomfortable with his hat in his hands, "I suppose this is where we part ways." Teresa felt an inexplicable sadness at the thought. "Yes, I suppose it is. I can't thank you enough for what you did today." "Just happened to be in the right place," he said modestly. An awkward silence fell between them. "Will you be staying in Tucson long?" Teresa finally asked. "A few days, perhaps. Need to resupply before I head after those remaining bandits. Then perhaps." Teresa hesitated, gathering her courage. "Perhaps I might buy you dinner this evening, as a small token of my gratitude." Vincent's face brightened visibly. "I'd be honored, Miss O'Malley." "Teresa, please." "Teresa," he repeated, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "I'll call for you at 7, if that's agreeable," she smiled. "Very agreeable." That evening, Teresa found herself taking unusual care with her appearance, pinning her auburn hair in a simple but elegant style and choosing her best dress, a deep blue that complemented her gray eyes. When Vincent knocked precisely at 7, her heart fluttered in a most unprofessional manner. He had cleaned up remarkably well, his face freshly shaved except for a neat mustache, his dark hair combed back, and his clothes, while still frontier practical, were clean and pressed. "You look lovely," he said, his eyes warm with appreciation. "Thank you," she replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "You clean up quite nicely yourself, Mr. Lawson." "Vincent, please." They dined at the hotel restaurant, the best establishment in Tucson, though modest by Eastern standards. Over roast beef and potatoes, they shared stories of their lives. Teresa told him about growing up in Boston, her teaching at a girls' school there, and her decision to seek adventure in the West. "My parents thought I was mad to come here," she admitted. "After this morning, I almost wonder if they were right." Vincent shook his head. "The West needs good teachers more than Boston does. It takes courage to come out here." "The sheriff called you a bounty hunter," Teresa said, changing the subject. "Is that true?" Vincent nodded, his expression growing more serious. "For about 3 years now. Before that, I was a cavalry scout. And before that, just another cowhand." "It sounds dangerous." "It can be," he admitted. "But there's a shortage of law out here. Someone has to help keep the peace." He paused, studying her face. "Does that bother you?" Teresa considered the question carefully. "I suppose it depends on whether you're hunting men for justice or money." A smile tugged at his lips. "A fair distinction. I try to focus on those who truly deserve capturing: murderers, stage robbers, cattle thieves, the ones making life harder for honest folks trying to build something out here." As the evening progressed, Teresa found herself increasingly drawn to this complex man. He was educated, though largely self-taught, with a quiet intelligence that belied his rugged exterior. He spoke of books he'd read, places he'd seen, and people he'd met with equal measures of insight and humility. They were so engrossed in conversation that they barely noticed the restaurant emptying around them, until the proprietor discreetly cleared his throat. "My apologies," Vincent said, quickly settling their bill. "I've kept you out far too late." Outside, the desert night was cool and clear, the stars impossibly bright above Tucson's modest buildings. Vincent offered Teresa his arm for the short walk back to her room. "When do you begin teaching?" he asked. "Monday," she replied. "I'm to meet with the school board tomorrow to discuss particulars." They reached her door all too quickly. Teresa turned to face him, suddenly reluctant for the evening to end. "Thank you for dinner," Vincent said, "and for the conversation. It's been a very long time since I've enjoyed an evening so much. Even after such an eventful day, especially after such a day," he said softly. "It reminds a person what matters." Their eyes held, and Teresa felt herself leaning slightly toward him. Vincent hesitated, then gently took her hand and raised it to his lips. "Good night, Teresa O'Malley," he said. "Sleep well." "Good night, Vincent." She watched him walk away down the hall before closing her door, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched it. The next morning, Teresa met with the school board, 3 stern-looking men and 1 practical woman who sized her up with a critical eye. "We were beginning to think you wouldn't arrive," said Mr. Henderson, the board chairman. "When we heard about the stage robbery, we feared the worst." "I was fortunate," Teresa said, "as were all the passengers." "Yes, we heard about the bounty hunter," Mrs. Davis, the only female board member, said with a hint of disapproval. "Quite dramatic." The meeting proceeded formally as they outlined her duties, the curriculum expectations, and the behavior they expected from the town's teacher. Teresa listened attentively, but found her mind occasionally drifting to Vincent. "Miss O'Malley," Mr. Henderson's voice snapped her back to attention. "Yes, I apologize. You were saying about the school supplies." The chairman frowned slightly. "I was explaining that your living quarters are ready. The schoolhouse has a small attached residence in the back. You can move in today if you wish." By afternoon, Teresa had relocated her few belongings to the small but clean rooms behind the schoolhouse. The building stood on the edge of town, a simple whitewashed structure with a bell tower. Inside, rows of wooden desks awaited the children who would fill them on Monday morning. As she arranged her books on the shelf, a knock at the door startled her. Opening it, she found Vincent standing there, looking somewhat uncertain. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. "I asked at the hotel where you might be found." "Not at all," Teresa said, her heart lifting at the sight of him. "Please come in. It's not much, but it's home now." Vincent removed his hat as he entered, looking around the modest quarters with approval. "It's a fine place, sturdy built. Would you like some tea? I just put the kettle on." They sat at her small table, drinking tea and talking easily as if they'd known each other for years rather than a day. "I've been thinking about those bandits," Vincent eventually said. "The 2 that escaped." Teresa felt a flutter of apprehension. "Will you be leaving to track them soon?" "Tomorrow," he confirmed. "They're heading for the border and every day gives them more lead." She nodded, trying not to show her disappointment. "Of course, that's your duty." "Teresa," he said, his voice soft but serious, "I don't usually. That is, in my line of work, I don't often form attachments." "I understand," she said quickly, though her heart sank. "No," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I don't think you do. What I'm trying to say, rather poorly, is that I feel something for you that I haven't felt in a very long time. Maybe ever." Teresa's breath caught. "Vincent, I know it's fast, too fast perhaps. We've known each other barely a day. But when you've lived the kind of life I have, you learn to recognize what matters when you find it." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not asking for promises. I wouldn't put that on you. But I would like your permission to call on you when I return." Relief and joy flooded through her. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I would like that very much." His smile was like the sunrise. "Then I have even more reason to complete this job quickly and safely." When Vincent left that evening, their parting was bittersweet. He promised to send word when he could, and Teresa found herself watching his figure until it disappeared down the dusty street. The next day, life in Tucson continued. Teresa prepared her classroom, met some of her future students and their parents in town, and tried not to think constantly of Vincent. By Monday morning, she stood nervously before 28 children of various ages, ranging from 6 to 16, and began her new life as Tucson's schoolteacher. The days passed quickly, filled with lessons, grading, and getting to know the community. Teresa found herself welcomed warmly by most of the townspeople, though a few of the more conservative matrons raised eyebrows at the young teacher who had arrived under such dramatic circumstances. Mrs. Davis from the school board stopped by one afternoon after classes. "You're settling in well," she observed, watching Teresa clean the blackboard. "The children seem to like you." "Thank you," Teresa said. "They're bright and eager to learn." The older woman hesitated, then said, "Word is that bounty hunter went after the remaining bandits." "Mr. Lawson, yes," Teresa replied carefully. Mrs. Davis's eyes narrowed slightly. "Be careful there, Miss O'Malley. Men like that, they're not the settling kind. They bring danger with them." Teresa kept her expression neutral. "Mr. Lawson saved my life, along with everyone else on that stagecoach. I consider him a friend." "Just friendly advice," Mrs. Davis said with a tight smile. "This town expects certain standards from its teacher." After she left, Teresa sat at her desk, troubled. She had known there would be challenges in a frontier town, but she hadn't expected her personal associations to come under scrutiny so quickly. A week passed with no word from Vincent. Teresa threw herself into her teaching, but each day she found herself scanning the horizon, hoping to see a familiar figure riding toward town. At night, she wondered where he was, if he was safe, if he was thinking of her as she thought of him. 10 days after Vincent's departure, Teresa was just dismissing her class when the door opened and Sheriff Miller stepped inside. His expression was grave. "Miss O'Malley, might I have a word?" The children filed out, sensing the seriousness in the sheriff's tone. When the last one had gone, Teresa asked, "What is it, Sheriff?" "Got a telegram from the Rangers down near the border," he said, turning his hat in his hands. "There was a shootout, those bandits from your stage holdup." Teresa's heart seemed to stop. "And Vincent, Mr. Lawson?" The sheriff sighed heavily. "He was shot. It's bad from what they say." The world tilted around her. "Where is he?" "They took him to a doctor in Nogales. That's all I know." Teresa moved without thinking, grabbing her shawl. "I need to get to Nogales." "Now hold on," the sheriff said, raising his hands. "Nogales is nearly 60 miles south. It's not a trip a lady makes alone." "Then find me an escort," Teresa said firmly. "I'm going." The sheriff studied her face, then nodded slowly. "The mail stage leaves for Tubac in the morning. From there, you can get transport to Nogales. I'll send a wire to have someone meet you." "Thank you," Teresa said, already calculating what she would need to pack. That night was the longest of her life. Teresa barely slept, her mind filled with images of Vincent wounded, perhaps dying, in some frontier doctor's office near the Mexican border. She prayed as she hadn't prayed in years, bargaining with God for Vincent's life. By dawn, she was at the stage office with a small valise, her hair neatly pinned beneath her hat, her traveling dress pressed. The clerk looked at her with surprise when she purchased her ticket. Nogales. Bit rough down there for a lady, especially with those bandits on the loose. "The bandits have been dealt with," Teresa said firmly. The stagecoach journey to Tubac took 6 grueling hours over rough terrain. When they arrived, Teresa found a Mexican farmer willing to drive her the remaining distance to Nogales for a few dollars. They reached the border town as the sun was setting. Nogales straddled the international boundary, with half the town in Arizona territory and half in Mexico. It was a dusty, rough place, filled with traders, smugglers, cowboys, and drifters. The farmer dropped her at the American side's Main Street. "Doctor's office is there," he said, pointing to a weathered building with a lamp burning in the window. Teresa thanked him and walked swiftly to the doctor's door, her heart pounding. A bell jingled as she entered, and an older man with spectacles looked up from a desk. "Dr. Phillips?" she asked. "Yes," he said, rising. "How can I help you, miss?" "I'm looking for Vincent Lawson. I was told he was brought here with a gunshot wound." The doctor's face registered surprise. "You family? I'm—" Teresa hesitated. What was she to Vincent? "I'm a friend. Please, how is he?" The doctor's expression softened slightly. "He's alive. Took a bullet through the shoulder, lost a lot of blood. Fever set in, but it broke yesterday. He's weak, but he's a strong man." Relief nearly buckled Teresa's knees. "May I see him?" The doctor hesitated, then nodded. Briefly. "He needs rest." He led her to a back room where 3 beds stood. 2 were empty. In the third, Vincent lay still, his face pale, his shoulder heavily bandaged. Teresa approached slowly, afraid he might be sleeping, but his eyes opened as she neared. "Teresa," he whispered, disbelief in his voice. "Am I dreaming?" She smiled through sudden tears, taking his hand in hers. "No dream. I came as soon as I heard." "You shouldn't have," he said, though his fingers tightened around hers. "It's dangerous here." "So was that stagecoach," she reminded him. "Yet you came for us." A ghost of his smile appeared. "That was different." "Not to me," Teresa said firmly. The doctor cleared his throat from the doorway. "5 minutes, miss. He needs rest." When they were alone, Vincent's eyes searched her face. "You left your students. It's Friday. They'll survive until Monday." She stroked his forehead gently. "What happened?" "Found the bandits hiding at a ranch near the border," he said, his voice weak but clear. "They didn't come quietly. I got one, but the other got a shot off before the Rangers took him down." He paused. "Wasn't as careful as I should have been." "But you got them," Teresa said. "You finished what you set out to do." "Teresa," Vincent said, his eyes serious despite his weakness. "When I was lying there, bleeding in the dust, all I could think about was you, how I might never see you again, how much I wanted to." Teresa felt tears threatening again. "I'm here now. I know my life isn't what a proper Boston lady should want," he continued. "It's dangerous and uncertain, but when I'm well enough to travel, I'd like to return to Tucson with you, see where this might lead." Teresa leaned down and, throwing propriety aside, gently kissed his lips. "I'll be waiting," she whispered. The doctor kept Vincent in Nogales for another week. Teresa stayed at a nearby boarding house, visiting daily as his strength returned. She sent a telegram to the school board explaining her absence due to a family emergency, and received a terse reply permitting her return by the following Monday. As Vincent recovered, they talked for hours, learning each other's stories, hopes, and fears. Teresa told him of her parents' death from influenza when she was 20, leaving her alone in the world. Vincent spoke of his childhood on a hardscrabble Texas ranch, his time in the cavalry, and how the death of his best friend had led him to bounty hunting. "I've been thinking," he said on the 5th day, sitting up in bed for the first time. "Maybe it's time for a change." "What kind of change?" Teresa asked. "The Rangers offered me a position, more settled than bounty hunting but still using my skills." He looked at her uncertainly. "It would mean staying in one place. Maybe Tucson if they need a deputy there." Teresa's heart leaped, but she kept her voice steady. "Is that what you want?" "What I want," Vincent said, taking her hand, "is a chance at a real life. With you, if you'll have me." 2 days later, they left Nogales together, traveling north by stagecoach. Vincent was still weak, his arm in a sling, but his color had returned, along with his quiet confidence. They arrived in Tucson on Sunday evening. Despite the whispers that immediately began circulating about the schoolteacher who had rushed to the side of a wounded bounty hunter, Teresa held her head high as they walked down the main street together. At the schoolhouse, Vincent hesitated. "I should find a room at the hotel." "Nonsense," Teresa said firmly. "You're still recovering. I have a perfectly good sofa where you can rest." The raised eyebrows and disapproving glances from certain townspeople the next morning didn't escape Teresa's notice as she walked to her classroom. Mrs. Davis was waiting for her. "Miss O'Malley," she said coldly, "the board would like to speak with you this afternoon regarding your absence." "Of course," Teresa replied calmly. After school, the meeting was exactly as uncomfortable as she had anticipated. The board members expressed their disappointment in her sudden departure and their concern about her reputation. A young, unmarried woman rushing to the side of a wounded man, staying in the same border town for days, Mr. Henderson said gravely, "then returning with him to your home. Surely you understand how this appears." Teresa sat straight in her chair. "I understand that appearance and reality are often different things. Mr. Lawson saved my life and the lives of everyone on that stage. When I learned he was gravely wounded in the act of bringing those bandits to justice, I went to offer what comfort I could to a friend." "Friend?" Mrs. Davis repeated skeptically. Teresa met her gaze directly. "Yes, and more, I hope. Mr. Lawson has been offered a position with the Arizona Rangers and is considering settling in Tucson." This news clearly surprised the board. The Rangers were respected lawmen. "Be that as it may," Mr. Henderson said, "we must consider the example you set for our children." "I believe I set an example of loyalty, courage, and compassion," Teresa replied. "Values I would hope to instill in my students." The room fell silent. Finally, the board chairman sighed. "We will take your explanation under advisement, Miss O'Malley. For now, you may continue your duties." As she left the meeting, Teresa found Vincent waiting outside, leaning against a hitching post. Despite his injured shoulder, he looked stronger each day, the desert sun bringing color back to his face. "How did it go?" he asked as they walked slowly back toward the schoolhouse. "They're not pleased," Teresa admitted, "but I think they'll come around." Vincent stopped, turning to face her. "Teresa, I won't be the cause of you losing your position. These past 2 weeks have shown me what you mean to me, but I won't ask you to sacrifice everything." Teresa smiled up at him. "Vincent Lawson, do you really think I'm the kind of woman who can be told what to do? I left Boston to find adventure and meaning. I believe I've found both." His expression softened. "I spoke with the sheriff today. There's an opening for a deputy here in Tucson. It's yours if you want it." "And if I want you?" she asked boldly. In answer, Vincent leaned down and kissed her, right there on the street for all of Tucson to see. When they parted, both were smiling. "I love you, Teresa O'Malley," he said simply. "I think I have since the moment you looked up at me from that stagecoach." "And I love you," she replied. "My unexpected hero." 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning, Teresa O'Malley became Teresa Lawson in a ceremony at Tucson's small church. The school board had eventually come to terms with their teacher's romance, especially once Vincent proved himself a valuable addition to the town's law enforcement. As they exchanged vows, Teresa couldn't help but remember that fateful dawn when bandits attacked the stagecoach and a mysterious cowboy rode out of nowhere to defend it. What had seemed like the most terrifying moment of her life had, in fact, been the beginning of her greatest adventure. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent drew her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of love. Outside, the Arizona sun painted the desert gold, just as it had on the morning they met, turning the ordinary into something magical, a fitting start to their life together.